Episode 29 of the Interpretation Station is Call to Order. Dobrodošli, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Interpretation Station, Stanica Prevoda. Could that work? In Jedi to English, yes, our favorite language, Jedi. We're going to be using the Montenegrin dialect of Jedi. Today. Our episode is going to be based, our episode of which is, of course, in the Wham Bam Thank You Roland format. I think I forgot to mention that last time when I did the Croatian dialect one. Yes, so our episode is going to be based today on a statement I posted, I think, at the weekend by the president of Montenegro, Djukanovic. So when he was speaking to the General Assembly, it was a special session of the General Assembly, and it was on the 3rd of December 2020, so fairly recent, going through all the ills that are facing the world, all the challenges, COVID-related, etc. Okay, so you can now see on the screen, I've pulled the statement up. And let's see what, there's some interesting things came up in this statement. So there's a lot of good chat on the LinkedIn comments and things. So a number of interesting points were raised. So, okay, the first thing I started you here was nice, easy, one thing to start you off with, like višestruki. Okay, I just put numerous. I mean, obviously there's a number of things, multiple, multifold, sometimes they say, but I thought, okay, just stick to numerous. I could have said legion, that's a word, the challenges are legion, but okay, stick to numerous. Okay, then konačnim posljedicama. So this is a good way, repercussions I've put, often as I say in English, you can sum up a concept which takes 2 or 3 words in a foreign language in one. So really that's what repercussions are effectively, konačne posljedice. Još uvijek ne možemo govoriti. I mean, the most natural way to say this then in English is, it's too early to predict. It's too hard to say at the moment. If you want to have the govoriti, it's too hard to say. So just, you want to make it sound natural in English. I mean, some of these things may seem fairly simple on the face of it. Just because I suspect that the majority of people who are watching the show, you are probably Jedi A's and English B's is my guess. So sometimes it's just good just to remember how in English the most, to remember these sort of the most natural things. Some of these things might seem obvious, but even I sometimes forget some of these apparently, seemingly obvious words, so it's always good just to keep them turning over. Now, the next thing I want to look at, very interesting, that I didn't even highlight, I must admit, but this is what triggered quite a few comments, as I say, on the LinkedIn. Bacila na koljena. Okay. Maria, who is a very active commenter, very enthusiastic commenter on the LinkedIn, so she made a very good point that an expression like this, bacila na koljena, sometimes it can be hard to find a good sort of snappy ad hoc solution to that. I mean, obviously in English, right, we have the, we can say it, it brought the world economy, global policies, medicine and science to its knees. But the problem when you say that is, you could in theory say it brought to its knees the global economy, global policy, etc. Sounds a bit clunky. It sounds more smooth if you say it brought the global economy, blah, 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 to its knees. Now, the problem here is that you have to remember what you said at the start, the brought, okay? And then when you have this long list, you've got 4 things here, global policy, economy, medicine, and science. Are you going to remember to throw in that to its knees at the end? Okay, that can sometimes be a problem with those phrasal verbs in English, where it's most natural sounding to have the verb at the start, before all the nouns, and then you have to remember to add the second part of the phrasal verb at the end. So she asked me about if I had a sort of ad hoc solution. Now, in the comments, I think I gave her a couple of options, right? I said a good one here is to play havoc with or to wreak havoc with. Now, the good thing with playing havoc is you can say that straight away in one package and then just say played havoc with the world economy, world policy, science, and medicine. So that works quite well in that respect. You also have the word devastated if you just want to have one word, like a one-word go-to solution. The only thing I'd say about devastated is it sounds good when you devastate the global economy, global policy. Sounds good if you know what I mean. Devastating science and medicine sounds a bit odd, to be honest. But devastate isn't a bad sort of safety thing. If nothing else is coming to mind, use devastated. Now, I said to her, however, I had a moment of inspiration, and I said, but I'm not going to. The only way you're going to find out about it is if you watch the episode. And so this is my moment of inspiration. I think I had two words actually came to mind. And the first one is, it is to cripple. The pandemic has crippled the world economy, global policy, science and medicine. Cripple. Okay, and a synonym of cripple is to hobble. Pandemic has hobbled global economy, policy, science, and medicine. Cripple and hobble. Okay? I think they are the best solutions, all right? For some reason, on these Jedi episodes, I'm having these moments of inspiration. I think if you watch the last one, when I did the Croatian dialect, I had the word, for turistička ponuda, menu. Okay? Well, now I think cripple, hobble for this, baciti na kola, as a quick go-to solution. One other solution I'd actually just throw in there is often we talk about leaving something reeling, or it sent the economy reeling, it sent medicine reeling. That is a very good word to know. Or we're still reeling from, often we talk about in English, we're still reeling from the impact of this, that, and the other. So that is another very good word to make a mental note of. Okay, so I think I've done you pretty well there. Okay, let's carry on then. Here, so okay, here, prolazi kroz najdublje, again, is in the midst of just one of these expressions that we use in English. It's just good to know, keep it turning over. Lanci snabdijevanja, supply chains, okay. Doživljavaju collapse. I mean, we can just say, are collapsing. Next sentence here, nacionalne vlade restriktivnim mjerama. So this is one of these sort of classic cases for the Slavic languages when you use like an instrumental to show something that you're using. And so here in English, the best way to perhaps approach this, you could say in this instance, national governments are using restrictive measures to curb the spread of the infection. Or, as I say, you can say national governments and then make that restrictivnim mjerama like a subclause. National governments using restrictive measures are seeking to curb the spread of the infection. Okay, so you've got a couple of options there. I mean, yeah, obuzdaju. So this is just another word, sort of good synonym, instead of always talking about limiting or restricting, to curb the spread. Okay, that's a good one to know. And then moving here, okay, again, and then he uses it again, stimulativnim mjerama. So again, this time I've given the other option. So I've said here, are using stimulus measures. We would say, by the way, stimulus measures. We wouldn't say stimulative. That's the sort of set expression, stimulus measures, to try to help. I guess you could just drop pokušavaju, by the way. They're using stimulus measures to help and to help maintain economic activity. Okay, then we have here najpogođenije, so a good solution here is the hardest hit. Those most effective, and the hardest hit is it sounds nice. And then when we talk here, dijelovi društva, we would tend to say here sections of society as opposed to, I don't know, parts or categories. Sections is the most natural sounding, as is with this expression here, stalni pritisak, constant pressure. So again, this is specific, for you Jedi bees, this is, just to remind you always of what the most natural sounding solutions are in English. Yeah. And again, here, sveobuhvatni, it's always good to remember that you just want, comprehensive is the go-to word there. At least at the UN, they'll talk about holistic, all-encompassing, which are all fair enough. But your best go-to one, again, is for something like sveobuhvatni. adekvatni is comprehensive. And then here, okay, this is quite a long wind. So this nećemo uspjeti u borbi protiv onoga što je is a very long-winded way of just saying, isn't it? We will not overcome the greatest challenge, you know. Okay, zdravstvena I sa njom povezana ekonomska kriza, so just a couple of handy adjectives, you know, the related economic crisis, the associated crisis. Here, nedovoljno snažnim I izgrađenim. I mean, so, you know, when you hear the nedovoljno, I guess you are going to be tempted, you know, you're naturally going to be thinking, okay, insufficiently, and then you're just going to put in those two, you know, whatever the adjectives happen to be, insufficiently strong, and izgrađenim, I guess, is developed. I mean, all that, again, those four words basically mean nedovoljno snažnim I izgrađenim, just means basically underdeveloped. So, you know, always think about how you can, if you know, again, if the sound quality is poor, if the speaker is speaking fast, always think about how you can, you know, take these little shortcuts to stay with the speaker. And again, here, duboko vjerujem. Now, obviously, you can say if you want, I profoundly believe, I deeply believe. But again, it might, you know, if you're falling behind and to try and get that profoundly out, it might take some effort. Whereas in England, in English, we have this sort of device, this emphasis where you can just say, I do believe. And if you can just, you know, put that emphasis in the do, pretty much gets across, as I say here in the margin. A stressed do carries the same weight as a profoundly or deeply. So yeah, it basically gets across that same feeling, that same impact, okay, when you stress, I do believe. Okay, ujedinimo snage, just a couple of good quick solutions there to join forces, pull together. I'm big one for pulling together. That's my actually standard, my sort of stock solution, pulling together. Otpornijem I održivom. Okay, this is a very, you know, you want to be hitting the right words here. So resilient is a very important word these days in global politics, more so than better than resistant. So you might be tempted to go towards resistant, but really resilient is the word you want. Održiv post-COVID svijet, like a sustainable post-COVID world. Then here I've bracketed realizacija. You know, this is one of those sort of almost redundant verbs here, you know, that often you can drop, you know, a world in which achieving Agenda 2030, I mean, you know, it speaks for itself. You know about the Agenda 2030. I mean, if you just say a world where Agenda 2030 is tangible, it just means the same thing. You just don't really need that. Realizacija doesn't really add much to it. I just gave you this, as I say, for izviesnija, something a bit different rather than just clearer. I think in English, you know, to tangible, with, you know, that's a very good adjective. Okay, moving on here. Oporavak mora biti održiv. So I've given you a couple of solutions here. Lasting and sustainable. So we talk about, so certain things like održiv, if it's mir, like peace, then like lasting peace is a very good word. If you want, you know, development, održiv razvoj is always going to be sustainable development. So there are certain ones, you know, sustainable peace and a lasting development, they don't sound right, but oporavak, I think with the oporavak you could get away with either a lasting recovery or a sustainable recovery. Lasting is easier to say, I'll say that. And again, I remind you here for otporni, resilient. Important word, and it is an important word. Do remember that one. Okay, poziv za akciju. So this is just to remind you, know, in English we say call to action as opposed to really call for action. It sounds, you're going to sound more native speaking if you say call to action. Next paragraph here, something similar to realizacije before ostvarenje agende 2030. Again, ostvarenje here is a bit redundant. You could easily just drop that. You know, onako kompleksan put ka, you know, this complicated path towards Agenda 2030. Saying complicated path towards achieving Agenda 2030, the achieving doesn't really add much. Now here I've just put in a star, držim da. So what have I done here? Okay, ciljevi održivog razvoja, sustainable development. So here održiv is sustainable. The reason I put držim da is, again, if you're falling behind, whenever the speaker says, I think, I believe, you can really drop that Okay, and you just go into the meat of the sentence, so you can say, the goals of sustainable development are the only relevant, globally accepted yardstick. Okay, then if you find that you've caught up, you can just throw that "I think" in later. This is why I say down at the bottom, a tactic I'll often use is if I'm at risk of falling behind, is to drop expressions like "I think" or "I believe," then throw them in later if I catch up. So you could say, he's going, okay, the goals of sustainable development right now, the only relevant, globally accepted yardstick, I think, for dealing with a whole string of challenges. So you've got that option in English. You can throw that "I think" or "I believe" in wherever you want, really, during a sentence. You don't even have, you're really falling behind, you don't have to throw it in at all, but you have that option of just chucking it in if he slows down for a moment at one point. And then, okay, just a bit of vocabulary to finish here. Putokaz, so a signpost, a yardstick. I guess signpost is the sort of mirror. That's what a putokaz is, right? Maybe yardstick sounds a little bit better. Porasta nejednakosti, we talk about growing inequality. Here we have očuvanje, zaštite, biodiversiteta. I don't think you need both of them. I mean, we tend to talk about the collocation you really want with biodiversity. I think it's protecting biodiversity. It sort of says it all. And this last bit, I give you something just a bit different for negatywnym pojavama. Instead of just always negative, adverse is always a good synonym, and it's always a good one to remember when you hear it coming in the other direction. And then here I've given you an interesting one. Okay. Naročito vidljive. So instead of saying particularly evident, particularly obvious, you could say so stark. Okay, just I mean, it's good. You're gonna find it difficult, initially to throw in words like stark. Even I find it difficult to remember for that to come to mind. But certainly, again, going in the other direction, you're going to hear words like that. You're going to hear the UK delegation, the Indian delegation is more likely. The Indians speak much better English these days than the UK delegation. They're much more vivid, much nicer vocabulary. The UK delegation just tends to speak in mantras and cliches. Okay, it's the Indians who really are the standard bearers nowadays for the beautiful English language. So they might talk about something being stark. So you want to remember that stark means vidliv. Okay, and then finally here, izbijanje pandemije. This izbijanje is sort of, again, a bit redundant. I mean, just in the first months of the pandemic. I mean, obviously, if you want to render izbijanje, it's like the outbreak of the pandemic. But again, it's a little bit redundant. Okay, so wham bam, hvala Rolande. That's pretty much it. Hope that helps. Hope you learned some new words there. Cripple, hobble. Remember those bad boys, okay? So yeah, if you enjoyed the episode, smash the thumbs up button. If you want to see more of these, and if you haven't done so already, please do subscribe or get notifications on the little bell that's down there. As I say, I'm trying to fire out one Jedi episode per week. We'll do a bit of Bosnian or Serbian dialect next week with any luck. And yeah, always a pleasure with you guys. Hope you learned something. Keep following me on the LinkedIn group. Join me on the LinkedIn, the Interpretation Station group, if you haven't done so already. Also, that sort of goes in parallel with what I'm doing here on the YouTube channel. And so that's it. So all I can say now is that episode 29 of the Interpretation Station is adjourned. Do widzenia.
The train